Now, the 15th Forum of Young Leaders in progress. We are facing the new discussion panel, reality after the pandemic. What Europe is necessary for Europe. Now we recognize our inequalities, so it is worth to ask a question how these inequalities must be equalized, how to involve new generation for active collaboration in that area. We shall ask our speakers. I would like to introduce them. Mr. Artur Soboń, Secretary of State, Minister of State Assets of Polish Republic of Poland, Mr. Michał Ossowski, Editor-in-Chief of Solidarność Journal, Mr. Maciej Tyczyński, Head of the Young Section NSZZ Solidarity, Gabriel Berezio, Head Manager-in-Chief, GEYC Romania. I hope Mr. Peter Seideneck shall join during the transmission. President Advisor for German Federation of Trade Unions. And we shall start from Alicja Skowron, representative of Solidarity. I welcome all participants who can see us. You can also ask questions. I would like to ask the first question to Minister and to reverse the topic of the panel. What Europe is necessary for the younger generation? I would like to reverse the question. What young generation is necessary for Europe? Because how young people should put stress to face new challenges that are waiting to our everyday life, both professional and social life. Thank you. Yes. The time are unsteady, in particular if someone is young and enters the professional life. The time of passing month is particularly unsteady. The situation related to the epidemic time affect the economy. And the data that are shown by the Commission, the drop of GDP by 14% in the second quarter of this year is about 14%. So it is a huge drop that was unknown in the past. And obviously it is reflected, it is important for young people who enter the labor market. By their nature, young people are have more troubles to find themselves on the labor market. The salaries are lower, the prospects are always a challenge, but the situation, the young started to working in sectors that are particularly affected by coronavirus, gastronomy, tourism. These sectors are extremely affected by the coronavirus, and they must cope with turbulences, with instability. It is the situation that still remain with us. The economy is only partly open, and we don't know how the situation will look like in future. We must get familiar with it, that there are no steady, firm solutions, no ready-made schematics. You must live in the situation. People who have only 20 some years, they must live in very unsteady times, and they must extend their competences, they must build their professional careers to preserve flexibility and ability to respond to changes that are expected in the nearest future, in particular technological changes. Obviously, these are also opportunities. When I speak with companies, the largest companies, advisory companies, centers of services, these are frequently global chains, and they say they work in many countries, on many continents, and this remote work was fictitious. But now people took their companies' laptops in their hands and work from home even more intensely than during the time when they spent their time in offices. So we can cope with the times. And I have the impression the young people in Poland who didn't have such easy time as their colleagues from Western Europe, they could adapt to new reality even easier. We can cushion the turbulences by innovativeness, by open-minded attitudes, and I'm sure that young people in Poland, from one side, they face the threat of continuous changes, but on the other hand, they have a great potential, great power, and they can work hard to face the challenges.
Mr. Minister, please tell me, because the job market earlier already had inequalities, and now there is a worry that the pandemic may deepen those inequalities. So is it really so that in the pandemic do we have the possibilities to make those inequalities more even? How can we influence this from the government side? Is there awareness of these problems there? Well, one should say that, yes, really, the economic slowdown is harmful for all economies, both developing and those developed ones, and where the debt is external debt, where it is extremely high, where the state is not able to carry out effective monetary policy, where the state is not able to generate funds to evoke investment, to give and maintain flexibility for entrepreneurs. So where these opportunities are smaller, there it is more difficult to successfully respond to the close down of economy. Therefore, all governments are trying to create various types of shields, instruments which will allow for this bounce back, which must follow after recession, to be a bounce up happening right away, soonest possible, without the need to wait for further quarters or years for this. And in this sense, it deepens those differences. If in the given state the possibility to generate support for entrepreneurs happen to be greater, then it means going easier, more easily through the problems. But the COVID also made a possibility to introduce systemic changes which wouldn't have been introduced if it was not for the epidemics. And now the whole range of legislative solutions which we were introducing over the recent period, also facilitating the life of young people, young entrepreneurs. These are the solutions we spent more time debating on. We wouldn't have probably decided to go into them when economy was working or would be working without disturbances. Of course, there is a threat of deepening these disproportions, but on the other hand, in my opinion, it is an opportunity to utilize such solutions, such instruments, which normally we would not be able to make use of. The pandemic mobilized us more to solve certain inconveniences which happened or were in place earlier. But can we count upon the job market to be more friendly for young people?
It is so that we have in Poland still we have quite a good situation with respect to labor market. Obviously, the situation is more difficult due to the epidemic, but we are really in a good condition. Is my impression that the drop minus 7.9 is one of the better results in all over the European Union. Obviously, it is a more difficult situation for young people, but I have an impression that we can cope with the crisis and we can come out. And the threat related to the illness will be a permanent threat. We can cope with the issue as a society. If it happens, we shall return to the immersibility, to the of the labor market, and the unemployment shall be reduced to the level that is never happened after the 1990. Thank you, Mr. Minister. I would like to change topic a little and ask a question to Michał Ossowski, since practically 1 week ago we celebrated 40th anniversary of Solidarity trade union, and all the 2020 year is devoted to celebration of the 40th year of Solidarity. Where the power of Solidarity was taken from, what was expected by employees, and maybe the history is a lesson for us, what we can learn from it during the pandemic time. Where the power was from. I think that it's not good when power dreaming in the society is underestimated, and their needs are also underestimated. What people need in their life, most of people, human life is work and bring up children. It determines the needs that are accompanied with humans, the need to feel safe at work, in employment, to achieve, to maintain the interests related to the sustaining of families, bring up children. Without these issues, it is impossible to speak about realization of their interests. What was added at the time of fight of Solidarity, was also associated with political issues. We didn't live in a free country. Many things were unavailable for us, things that were available for people in Western Europe. top. There was an iron curtain, and people looked like in a different way. The abyss that separated our country from Western Europe was giant. It is why the need arises to make changes, to live in a democratic and independent country. But besides these fundamental works, there were normal everyday problems. The power, the authority that nominated as the authority of workers, they played against the workers, and that giant social movement that has led to that changes, changes that seemed for the generation nearly impossible. Overcoming the communist system seemed to be impossible. Nobody could believe that communists can fall down in Poland. 20 postulates of the trade unions, not yet Solidarity, because Solidarity was recited some later, but most of that claims of the postulates related to everyday life, the protection of the basic needs, or even a bit more. For instance, free Saturdays now seems obvious. It is because Solidarity fought for limitation of trade on Sundays. We achieved a success, and many people can have free Sundays. So it demonstrates that these postulates from August 1980 are still alive, are still valid, and they need further implementation. It is the question that is important for further generation, for the generation that fights the same problem, that must cope with the same problems. We must think how to secure our basic interests, and it affects how our future life will look like. I think it is necessary to learn from these lessons in the past to equalize proportion, but these human needs remain the same for ages.
Apart from pandemic, isolation, it makes our activities together more difficult. In the past, we would meet and protest and act for improvement of the better future. But how today, in the period of pandemic, can we act realistically, be it in the context of trade union or such involvement, social involvement? The world has changed. It changes very rapidly. In the past, generation change was 15, 20 years. Today, we may say that generations change every 5 years. The world has change has shrunk, not physically, but the possibility of communication. And of course, the pandemic we are facing today makes interpersonal relations more difficult and changes us perceiving the world regarding interpersonal relations. But on the other hand, we have access, today's formula, which we are meeting in, shows that we can be active, we can meet and talk, and it seems that today utilization of social media, which had been in use already because it is not a new phenomenon. Young people more and more often, well, generally, practically, solely seem to be using the social media. For them, it is a natural tool for communication, as different from elderly people. And this is perhaps the positive side, because if we imagined a similar pandemic a couple dozen years ago, then communication would have been very difficult or even impossible today. We can operate and successfully act based on electronic communication. Of course, nothing will replace face-to-face meetings in real world. Nevertheless, one should also learn to live with greater utilization of electronic communication and do what is to be done by ourselves. And how do you think is this active involvement now most necessary now during the pandemic, or will it be more necessary after this pandemic is over? Well, it seems that this active involvement is necessary all the time. It was necessary before the pandemic, during, and it will be needed after. The pandemic, of course, somehow influences the change in communication possibilities, communicating with the society. One has to be adjusted, adapted to new reality. But let's remember that the world keeps changing constantly, not in the perspective of 2-3 years, but a decade or two. Well, very significant changes worldwide happen, which we will be facing in the future as well. Today, it's the pandemic. It is, of course, a difficult situation. We have to get ready for it, and we have to learn living with it. But we must not assume that in future no other phenomena would take place, which we cannot even foresee at the moment. And I believe that active involvement of young people, especially young people, let's remember that they are those who are structuring the world. They are actually preparing it for their own needs. This process has been in place forever, and thanks to this, the world has been changing. It is important, and active involvement of young people is most important. More mature people usually like to keep the status quo, and the young person is looking for new solutions, a new vision of the world, and this is really, of course, very good. The question what this vision should look like, this is a question for a young generation to be addressed with, but this active involvement must be in place all the time, and it must not be fainting, because this might result in the world looking differently.
You said a very interesting thing, that we should be involved all the time. But why? What is the reason that maybe we have different problems during the pandemic? After the pandemic, the problems will be also different. The objective is important, because we focus not around problems, but about objectives. How the social organization work? It is the question I would like to ask question to Mr. Maciej Tyczyński, because he is the leader of the youth section of Solidarity Union. Maybe you can see involvement of that young people into social organizations, maybe trade unions. What is your experience? Is the involvement permanent or not mandatory? Welcome cordially. Thank you for invitation, a possibility to take floor. It is a meeting of young people. The trends are that maybe everyone can see it. We have still less and less time. We move from home to works. We chase something which actually cannot be defined. When to think about it, we don't know what it is, what we are looking for, what we desire for. Young people do not think about future. They are not interested in trade unions. Sometimes they even don't know what they are and what is what their work. They start the adventure with trade unions only when they have problems, conflicts, problems at work, and I believe it is really bad if we only need trade unions for help to fix up the personal work or to mitigate the conflict with the employer. Such membership we can see that such a trade union member that only can play something to fix up his issues leave us. If someone want to establish trade union only to fight against the company, we won't sign up because it's cutting the branch we are sitting on. So the worst thing is establishing organization when something is wrong. Our section of FIAF gathers people who want to act. It is a place act. The future trade union is the best place. We can work with, we can fight for the condition of working, we can use the legal advices. We also offer possibility for development of the career, participation in the social dialogue. We are a social partner, a representative organization. We participate in the Council of Social Dialogue. We are involved in legislative process. We can affect various processes. So trade union is a perfect place for young people to get support and advice. But the most important privilege that can be obtained from membership trade union is possibility to participate in various projects. We can see the need to invest in young people. Why and in which way? By participation in training in international conferences. It is a method of promotion. I would like to go deeper in the international context. So I would like to ask Mr. Peter, because he will have a great perspective as advisor to the president of the Federation of German Trade Unions, to return to the topic of pandemia. It can be an excuse to breach standards of employees. You are waiting for.
Well, can you hear us? If you don't hear us, then let's move on to the next question, discussion with the next speaker, and we hope Peter Seideneck will appear in our broadcast once again. Then let me ask Gabriel in what world we would like to live after pandemia, and on what values we would like to base our social and economical system.
There is no translation. I can't follow the discussion. This is my problem.
Okay, so I will try in
Dzień dobry. Dziękuję. I'm very sorry, but if I can't follow the discussion, I cannot join the discussion. You may understand that. I'm very sorry for that.
Jak najbardziej, panie Peterze.
By all means, Peter. So let me repeat in Polish the question. If there is no translation, please give me information and I will ask the question in English, okay? So can the pandemic be an excuse to lower the standards and to not respect the employees' rights? Alicja.
Okay. can a pandemic period be an excuse for not respecting workers' rights or lowering employment standards?
Of course not. This is pretty clear to all of us. I mean, the pandemic is on the one hand a disaster, but on the other hand, it's a lesson to learn from. For all of us, including trade unions. It's a global disaster. Even those who are far away from us are close because of the pandemic. Changes in the labor market started before the start of the pandemic, but it will be drastically increasing. And this is a challenge for trade unions. So we should try to learn lessons for ourselves. One question is how to reach out to those who are more and more in precarious jobs. And who are heavily hidden by the crisis now. Without protection, without assistance, and without help from our side. Because we cannot reach out to them. But we must reach out to them. I was just a couple of weeks ago in a meeting at the German-Polish border in Frankfurt with Polish colleagues. And the issue was how to help and to assist workers from Poland working in Germany, especially those working, for example, in agriculture, in the health sector, in the service sector. And as far as I know, you have a lot of Ukrainian workers in Poland. Probably confronted with the same problem. So the answer to that cannot be unilateral. It's not enough to have solidarity declarations. We must adopt our structures. In that specific case, for example, I strongly believe that there is a need for bilateral structures to assist those workers who are partly without legal protection. So we must be inventive, we must be creative. We cannot follow the traditional way, we need new ways. And to detect that, we need the help of the workers who are concerned. We must reach out to them so that they can reach out to us. Another
improve employment standards. How can we improve it?
Let me be very practical. In that specific case, for example, we should establish a joint German-Polish trade union structure especially focusing on those workers. There are structures on the two sides already. In Germany, we have a fair mobility. There is, for example, in Berlin, a Polish colleague, Agnieszka, working on that. But we need a joint one. Second problem, workers concerned must be linked up by internet. All of them have a mobile phone. So they need exchange among themselves and with us. So we should try to go that way. They will not from today to tomorrow join a trade union organization. They are under pressure. Not all of them, but a lot of them. They're exploited. And these people are now, in the conditions of the crisis, in a more precarious position than they had even been before. Some of them have no insurance for health. They are not entitled to be ill. If they are ill, they are not paid. And this is not a problem only between us, with Polish workers, Ukrainian workers in Poland. It's a global problem, it's a European problem. And we need to establish new forms of trade union approach.
Would you like to tell something about your trade union perspective? Why is the permission to restrict workers' rights in connection with the economic turmoil?
There is no permission. But on the other hand, the reality is today that workers are in a difficult position because they have the pay cut. I don't know how many, I think it's about more than 2 or 3 million workers in Germany receiving now 60-70% of their income because they cannot work, actually. But this is based on an agreement with the trade unions. So there can be nothing done without agreement and consultation and negotiations with the trade union. This is clear to me. Of course, some will abuse the crisis to cut workers out of rights. But on the other hand, it's interesting to state that those neoliberals who normally deny the role of the state do now calling for state support. So something happens.
Thank you so much. Is Gabriel with us? I would like ask you something about vision. What world would we like to be in after a pandemic? On what values should the social and economic system be based?
It seems we have technical problems, so perhaps I will move on to questions which participants ask at the MK Events platform, and then if Gabriel manages to get connected, I would ask to be informed about it, and then we will be back to that question.
The question is, in case when pandemic lasts longer, more than 2 years, how our life will change. At the beginning of the pandemic, we understood that many things can be done via internet, education, programming. Is it possible that these work shall be done mostly via internet? Maybe Michał Ossowski can answer that question, because he has a very broad view on the various sectors, or maybe someone else would like to answer. Maybe Mr. Michał. Yes, how our life will change. I think the situation we have to cope nowadays, it will not be finished in some degree, because a virus appeared, and that virus won't disappear from the public space. We must learn how to live in that new situation as we have now. We remember we don't remember, maybe you know from the history of the 1918, the virus of flu made a disaster, and we live with it even today. We shall will permanently with the coronavirus. The question is how our life will look like, how fast we shall be immune, and we have a vaccine to cope with the situation. But globalization, what we have been speaking about, shrinking of the world in the communication, shall make us exposed to situation. Such events shall have take place in future, and in future we shall have to analyze some behavior models, how to follow up under such situation. For many years, the world hasn't had problems with the situation. The pandemic happened in past that now we have. We shall have to work out new procedures to change the mode of life, but the world shall return to the normal life. In spring, the economy was on the lockout. Now we can cope better. Obviously, some components of remote working still remain with us, components of the electronic communication, but the world shall move further, and we shall have to find out ourselves. Our procedures also spoke about it, protection of the human interests at work. It was mentioned about the contracts, insurances. These issues now become even hotter. When I was starting my professional career, it was very common that the flexible form of work are not better. It is the best way to work work on the self-employment. That pandemic demonstrates that it's not the point. The state is necessary. These state structures are even more necessary under such situation that individuals cannot preserve themselves. They need a strong organization, and the state is such a strong organization. Such the trade union organization are also strong, and they have a task to maintain regulation of the employees' situation for such a case that will also happen in future, I'm sure. And the answer to it, how to live, how our life will change, the first, how to live, yes, to protect ourselves by hard work and also by fighting for stability, for employees' rights. We must make conclusions, we must take care about our security, our future, our organization of trade unions that should take care about our stability in future, which shall be easier to counteract such obstacles that may happen to us.
Well, yes, thank you very much, Michał, for your response. Here we have small technical problems with Gabriel, but I think we will move on because I have the next question. I guess if Mr. Minister is still with us, I think it would be the very right question to ask him what is priority, number of jobs or rather quality of work. We are talking of entrepreneurship, pandemia, the young people, but if apart from number of jobs we focused on quality, perhaps we wouldn't have such effect of pandemia. Jobs were lost mainly and first of all by young people who often have legal job contracts proposed. Maybe this is the good direction for creating policy.
Yes, it is true. It is true. It is easier to make redundant young people, to offer unsteady forms of employment, but quality of work that offers guarantees. I understand that it is the sector, it varies from one sector to another, depends on the importance for national economy, for better, for more advanced in technological tasks, they are better paid. It does not depend on the form of employment. We need experts that can, want to work specific jobs. They will be more necessary, and we must find them on the labor market. And it also must be adapted to the condition on the labor market. Sorry, but I think we have to we also must implement quality criteria. It's not the job. It also belongs to the economy that gives a spur to creation of the new jobs around the newly created businesses. So quality of work is a method of employment, and also jobs in economy, such jobs that
uderzone przez koronawirus, to też, żeby sprawiedliwie
are
tak, to znaczy to są miejsca
deprived by
pracy,
the coronavirus. These are the simplest jobs, but also all sectors. For instance, aviation. So we shall come back to the question to Mr. Gabriel.
I would like to ask you about the vision. What world would we like to be in after a pandemic? On what values should be social and economic system be based?
Can you repeat the question? I think I couldn't hear it.
What world would we like to be in after pandemic?
Perfect. But I hear the Polish translation. Maybe I can unmute. I think I can mute the Polish translation, so now I can hear myself. And you can hear me as well. Thanks for the invitation. The life after the pandemic. That's a good question, and that's why in the past 2 months we did a very important consultation in the region of Europe and Central Asia, together with UNICEF Europe and Central Asia, in order to find out what young people believe should be the life after the pandemic. So I would like to share with you some of the conclusions of this discussion and maybe some food for thought. Probably you know that many schools were closed during the pandemic, so the youth believe that the use of learning management systems could bring better administration, documentation, delivery of classes and performance tracking, evaluation and monitoring. The teachers and the school should have a better crisis management. The same applies for authorities. And in regards to creating more sustainable jobs for young people, the participants thought that more incentive for sustainable jobs and entrepreneurs from the government, as well as support and guidance for young entrepreneurs, including an intergenerational collaboration, would be the key for success.
So do we need more solidarity?
We need a lot more. And based on this, I would like to maybe give the voice to a question expressed in the European Forum of Young Leaders Facebook group. We have Ulvi Sarkarli that was asking a similar question to that, saying that the young leaders in the non-EU countries like Belarus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Ukraine need much stronger EU as a motivation and benchmark. And her question was if this political split that they see between Eastern and Western Europe would have impact on youth and youth NGOs. And I think it's quite an interesting question, because when COVID-19 crisis hit, all of us were unprepared. So we saw that each country took their own measures. We saw countries closing borders, canceling flights, imposing measures and restrictions suddenly with no coordination between them. Last week, we saw European Commission proposing to the European Council a plan to coordination between all these measures. So I think this is the way forward. Now we have COVID-19. Before we had migration crisis. Then we had Brexit. Every year, I think we have one crisis that we should fight, and we should fight together. And as a conclusion to that, we need more solidarity. In the consultation we did with UNICEF, youth suggested that we need to have more programs for inclusion of marginalized groups with a focus on changing body attitude of teachers and students towards youth. And also we need to take care of vulnerable groups when we think about elderly or those that have health issues. And especially in the post-COVID-19 recovery process, respondents believe that youth in their communities can have a better impact.
Myślę, że już jesteśmy po czasie. Bardzo dziękuję panu Gabrielowi. Myślę, że już musimy powoli kończyć.
Well, I think time is already over. Thank you, Gabriel. Let me check if there are any questions on the platform, but I don't see anything new. So if we don't have questions, thank you very much. Thank you for moderation of this conference. Alicja, Skowron, NSZZ Solidarity, and thanks to Mesh's speakers, Artur, Soboń, Secretary of State, Ministry of State Assets, Mr. Peter Seideneck, Head of German Federation of Trade Unions, Mr. Michał Ossowski, Chief Editor of Solidarity Weekly, Mr. Maciej, Tyczyński, leader of youth section of NSZZ Solidarity, and Gabriel Brazio, Chief Manager of GEYC Romania. Thanks for participation in this panel titled What Europe Young Generation Needs. And here during the discussion an interesting question arose, what youth current Europe needs. A lot was being discussed about the fact that this economic chaos is an opportunity for young generation, and on the other hand, it's a lesson from which we have draw lessons learned. And the world with rapid changes was discussed, and the young generation can adapt to these changes very quickly, especially in science and business, where electronics and IT awareness is more and more important. But on the other hand, it was mentioned that young generation should find time for rational slowdown with more awareness and greater empathy in participation in professional life, especially in relation to the trade unions. So this is about this discussion panel. Economic Forum of Young Leaders is to inspire future politicians, scientists, but also future businessmen. That's why we would like to invite you to virtual walk in large Polish companies. It will be KGHM, Polish Copper, Azoty Puławy, and Gas System. Please be invited.
Copper is a resource that is expensive for many sectors. It finds application in electrotechnic, power engineering, civil engineering and telecommunication. The largest deposit of copper in Europe and one of the largest in the world are in Lower Silesia. They enable production for 40 years. How to see how the production of copper is going on? We visited one of the largest producers worldwide, KGHM SA. It is also the second producer of silver and also produces gold in some amount. The starts from underground, 900 meters below the ground level. It is the copper mine Lubin, one of three mines that belong to copper KGHM. They produce 28 million of copper ore at 8 divisions with a total area of 150 square kilometers. The copper ore is deposited at the depth of 400 to 800 at the location of the old sea. It is the rock from the sea bottom contain such metals how copper, silver and gold. They can be found in sandstone, shale and carbonic ore is the main source. Also the sandstone ore is a source of the dispersed first the deposits are cut by chambers, rock chambers with roads where technological vehicles move for transportation. Miners are distributed to the workplaces by special buses and also by off-road vehicles. We take one of them. They have their network of roads. We come to the mechanical chamber where mechanical equipment is maintained. Every 250 hours, the machines are inspected and repaired. The largest loader have the weight of 40 tons with the capacity of the shovel up to 8,000 cubic meters. Most of machinery is produced by KGHM Zanam company. We must see how the copper ore is produced. First, before blasting, a roof is secure, anchors are installed to secure the roof against falling down. Then drilling is made, boreholes are drilled in the face at specific angles, and then they are charged with blasting material. Blasting jobs are carried out at a specific time where there is surety that beside the blasting operators no one is present. Then the shovel loaders can be used to collect the material. Up to 15 tons are loaded at one time and to charging, and then the material is conveyed by belt conveyors to the main shaft and then to the copper mine surface. That rock contains copper ore, silver and gold. It must be treated at the treatment plants because the ore contains only 1% of copper. It is too little for processing at smelters. It is why our company deals with increasing of concentration of copper to produce concentrate up to 14% of copper. So let's see how the concentrate is produced. In the sieves screens, the fractions are separated, coarse and fine fractions. Coarse fraction must be disintegrated. This material goes to flotation and mills with pulverizing machines. Wet pulverizing is processed several times by ball mills, and then special additives are added for foam formation, which that foam is concentrated, that is thickened, compacted and dried. The waste materials from is deposited to the dump in Żelazny Most, and the concentrate by railway transport is delivered for further processing. It is the last phase of production. We are visiting the smelter of copper in Głogów. Since the concentrate is different, so it must be averaged. It means properly mixed to have 24% of copper. Then the feed is supplied to the suspension smelter with the temperature up to 100-500 centigrades. The material is fed by burners and distributed by compressed air inside the smelter. When it drops from the height of 10 meters, it is separated from the waste from slag, and then it is a discharge of material in the operator dressed in a special protecting cloth first discharges slag from the openings that are a bit higher than because it also contains copper, so it is forwarded to electric furnace, where content of oxygen is reduced to produce smelt of copper, lead and iron. Then the copper is purified from iron and it is the same copper that is huge amount of water are necessary that are used for cooling. About 20,000 cubic meters of water are used. If you assume that it is 120, it is as much as 2 towns consume, Lublin and Głogów. Obviously the bath is not disposed, it is recirculated. It must be cooled down, and then a portion of water is evaporated. So we come back to the process. It is time for raffination, refining, for anode furnace where arsenic and lead are oxygenated up to the content of 99.9 copper in the material. Then the electrolytic process is started, where the copper atoms are transferred to the anodes. Then the cathode adopts it is how the cathodes with the content of 99.99, but obviously the slag is also not removed. It's used to produce silver and gold. We only show the final phase of the process, which is strictly confidential. KGHM is the second producer of silver worldwide, produces 12,000 tons of silver and also about 3 tons of gold with the 99.9 purity of gold. The copper cathodes are delivered to the storage and then delivered to producer worldwide that are used in for various systems, for cables and even smartphones. Annually, KGHM produces 3 times more than the symphonies. This is the largest factories in Poland. Substitute channel you want to emit. You can see the portal Fabryki w Polsce.pl.
Out of a billion
Z miliarda metrów
2.5 million tons of granular fertilizers per year, 2.5 million tons of liquid fertilizers per year, 250,000 tons of granular chemical products per year, 250,000 tons of liquid chemical products per year. How do we do it? We have over 50 years of experience in manufacturing process management. Our key fertilizer products: RSM UAN, Pulrea urea, Pulan ammonium nitrate, Pulsar ammonium sulfate. Our chemical products: melamine, caprolactam in the solid and liquid state, hydrogen peroxide, AdBlue, Pulnox, Licam. Industrial gases: carbon dioxide, highest quality hydrogen, carbon dioxide in the solid state, dry ice, minus 78 degrees Celsius, carbon dioxide in the solid state, coolant, a new form of the product, pellets. We make our own highest quality packaging. We invest in new machinery stock. We pack our products ourselves, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Every day we load 250 lorries and 150 railway carriages. dispatched across the country, abroad, to seaports. We are constantly monitoring the quality of our products using 7 laboratories, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We use state-of-the-art technologies to support manufacturing process management. ABB, Honeywell. We care about the environment. We perform flue gas desulfurization and use the sulfates for further production. We care about our safety. We have our own fire service. We hold regular exercises. We focus on energy security. We have our own heat and power generating plant. Our competencies allow us to think of a more advanced energy production. We have excellent logistics. The loading process takes only 20 to 30 minutes. A specialized fleet of tankers to transport RSM and modern loading lines. (500 rail tankers, approximately 650 railway carriages in total. More than 26,000 railway carriages transporting our products are dispatched per year. We have 64 kilometers of our own railway tracks. We have our own sea transshipment base, more than 70,000 tons of storage capacity in ports, exports of more than 500,000 tons per year. We invest in new technologies. And all of this is for our common good. Every year, we allocate 350 million zloty for new investments. The market is our key criterion for investment decisions. Our relations are based on very important principles: responsibility and security of cooperation, long-term nature of our operations, full communication of value of our product range, which is not only the physical product itself, but also our relationship with the customer. We promote talents and are proud of our achievements. We work with passion, which makes us a team of committed people striving to do new and difficult things. We respect the tradition and look for creative solutions.
Pracowników Gas System łączy wiedza, pasja i
Gas system are joined by passion, involvement and knowledge. Owing to them, you can realize advanced projects and we can experiment our, we take care about our employees. Since social dialogue is basic for good collaboration. It's 8th of March 2007. It's a historical picture. We have just signed the company collective labor agreement. It guarantees our employees extensive financial benefits, social protection, wage stability. It was the beginning of the social dialogue at our company. We do not expect to develop so much as pressing employees issues. We resolved a lot of hot issues. We agreed issue of on-call home. It is we are facing joining of company, gas system and Polish market. We should participate. A conservative social partner decision change is our everyday life. discussion among representatives of the employer and trade unions active in gas system are usually lively, sometimes hard, but we always manage to work out satisfactory solution together. Dialogue with the social side is the basis of mutual relationships. It's a platform for exchanging information and views on issues directly affecting employees at the company's operation. Thanks to this, we have better legal safeguards for employees. We still meet because we believe in our power of dialogue. The voice of our employees is very important for us.
Forum Ekonomiczne Młodych Liderów, internetowe transmisje z paneli dyskusyjnych, z tematycznych warsztatów, z wirtualnych spacerów po polskich przedsiębiorstwach, ale także rozmowy z naszymi gośćmi. Dlatego teraz już zapraszam na wywiad z prezesem PFRON Krzysztofem Michałkiewiczem.
Powinny być aktualne z tego względu, że to był ruch.
They should be up to date because this was a formation movement for many still living citizens of our country. So I also had the pleasure to participate in it at that time. And at that time, the system of values was being created, which I hope to be still faithful to. These values are, of course, basic values. That means honor, truth, the good, but also solidarity. Solidarity in the meaning of a very Christian, Catholic dimension. Our Pope, John Paul II, talked beautiful of it. Carry each other, the burden of each other. We tend to be building social solidarity movement in Poland, where family and handicapped people are actually supported especially. Of course, the time is always new and difficult. These days are sometimes time of fast changes, and also the values are subject to reflection, whereas for sure there are those which are constantly, always, regardless the period, time in which we happen to be living, they are up to date. These are those values I mentioned earlier. The benefit of the other person should always be number one. What challenges are ahead of young people in the nearest time due to COVID pandemia? Pandemia makes us sensitive to, should make us sensitive, especially to the needs of people who are under threat. In this difficult period, I think of building good relations with your nearest people, your parents, grandparents, but also to focus on people who are weaker in our society, who require special attention, special care, and special support in this difficult period. What features should a young leader have these days? These days are the time of quick changes, and of course it is important for us to be able to adapt to the changing reality so that we learn fast and that we are able to cooperate with others, but also for us to be faithful to the basic values. That means that always in our operations and activities, a human being should be most important. We are promoting solidarity. Well, the first day of Economic Forum of Young Leaders is approaching its conclusion. We started officially. The speakers had their messages addressed at the youth, who later participate in thematic workshops on savoir-vivre and fake news and computer intelligence, artificial intelligence, or building civic society. Then we participated in a very interesting debate on the role of the youth in reality after pandemia, which ended very recently. Recently we were visiting very interesting Polish companies, but this is only the first of 3 interesting days. The agenda for tomorrow is very interesting too. We will start about 10:15 from discussion panel, Digital Evolution or Revolution? at 12 o'clock. It is a very important point of our meeting. President of the Republic of Poland, Andrzej Duda, will be our guest, and you will be able to ask him questions. You can do it already now via our application. Those questions which get most likes, those likes may already now be appearing next to those questions. I will have the pleasure to ask those questions on your behalf to Mr. President after that meeting at about 5 minutes past 1. Yet another panel, Young Europeans, the image of freedom and solidarity. And after it, the last discussion panel tomorrow, what heroes the world needs, what examples to follow the world needs now. And by the evening, we will invite you at about 6 p.m. To the Polish evening, which will also be held online. So be invited for tomorrow. Thank you for your attendance today and see you.
Co by było, gdybyś wyruszył w podróż do
What will happen if you move to an
wspaniałą przygodę i odkrył dla siebie
experience
coś
a
wyjątkowego.
fantastic experience and discover something interesting,
Zachwycające miejsca, które
amazing
sprawią, że
places
poczujesz się
when
wolny.
you make you feeling
zaczynasz
free
patrzeć na
and
świat
start
zupełnie
looking at the world in different way.
Co by było,
What will
gdybyś
happen
znalazł się w
if
miejscach,
you
o których
are
słyszałeś,
at location
ale nie miałeś okazji
where you
ich odwiedzić,
heard about them but you didn't have the opportunity to
w których
visit,
poczujesz
where you can
spokój,
feel
radość i chęć do
peace,
działania.
joy and will to act.
W miejscach, gdzie
Location
natura współgra
where
z
nature coacts with humans enables slow down and get a right for relaxing.
A gdybyś
And if you move to a country of unforgettable experiences, emotions, and positive energy, well, that shall stay in your memory for a long time. What will happen if day by day you can coact with a culture that are inspiring for everyday life? If you see what is entrancing of beauty and reminds about the most important thing in your life, what will happen? You find a place when you can be just yourself, where you feel happy and safe. What will happen if you can call that place that is your home? What will happen if you can stay longer? Małopolska for longer.